While I was working on my recent Magic Find Breach video, I started thinking about ways I could make it work as a farm strategy that doesn't involve Magic Find at all. And this video is the result of that testing and theorizing. I'm pretty happy with how it's come out. This is definitely a strategy that I will be adding into my repertoire for future leagues. Hi, it's Lerald, and this is my strategy for maximizing profits from low investment Dunes Breach. Once again, I'm happy to say we've recently gained access to YouTube memberships due to the amazing response we've received on this channel. If you want to support us even further as we keep growing and making more videos, that's the best way to do it. Alright, since we're coming right on the heels of the Magic Find version of this farm strategy, I wanted to make an effort to emphasize the differences here between the two approaches, and then otherwise I'm going to kind of zip through this a bit. Unlike with the high investment Magic Find strategy, we're keeping costs super low. We also don't need Magic Find. It won't hurt, but it just isn't necessary. We're also moving through maps a lot faster. On average, I think I'm finishing maps in a range of about 7 to 10 minutes or so, as opposed to the 10 to 15 I was spending in heavily juiced maps. We're specifically trying to maximize our profits from league mechanics. We really don't care about currency explosions from rares. We will occasionally get Divine Orb drops due to blue wisps from the Affliction League mechanic, but we aren't big game hunting here. Not this time. We're focusing on steady currency generation with an occasional big drop that'll make you go, ooh, nice. As in the previous video, I'll just add this note. When Grinding Gear redesigned Breach and Crucible League, they made it so that Breach Splinter drops are affected by item quantity. So even though we're not using Magic Find on our gear, getting a big quantity roll on the map and taking quant and rarity alters is still really good for maximizing profits. What we're doing with this strategy is really farming two things at once. Thing one, we are farming Breach. We are farming Chayula Breachstones. They're an in-game boss fragment, so they're really valuable, especially once a league is fairly well matured, and they're worth 1.3 to 1.5 divines each in bulk, and they sell fairly quickly. We can consistently farm 1 to 1.5 Breachstones per map, and we're only spending about 50 chaos per map between Scarabs and Sextants. Builds that have Explodey are really powerful in this strategy. There are so many mobs in the breaches that a on-death explosion can quickly chain through a pack and screen clear. This is really useful if you have Explodey from a charm, or you're playing an occultist or a chieftain. Thing number two that we're farming, Harbingers. Harbingers are vaguely similar to Breach in that you fight a circle of guys. That's basically where the similarities end, but that's fine. The positives of Harbinger are that it doesn't require as much running around as Breach does, and you can get some pretty valuable currency drops, such as entire Exalted and Annulment Orbs, and occasionally even Fracturing Shards, which are worth a little over 1.5 divines each. The downside to Harbinger is that it can be a little boring, so if you don't like it, you can drop it for something else like Expedition. Let's take a look at our Atlas here. This is our Atlas strategy. As you can see, we are not taking Wandering Path. It's not a Magic Find setup, so you don't need it to make it function. Breach scales with quantity and rarity, so we still want the quant and rarity wheels in the middle of the Atlas passive tree, and we still want the top hat that gives us all of the increased map effect. We could do Wandering Path, but I've played around with it, and when you're not running Magic Find, it really isn't as great. We're also taking 7th Gate. That's kind of a given. We have to take that in order to get Breach on the map device in Affliction League, so that's sort of an unfortunate way that we have to spend quite a few points, actually. There's 2 here up top and 2 in the middle, and then of course the 1 on 7th Gate, so that's 5, but then there's 3 travel nodes down to these 2 down here, so you're spending, I guess that's 10 entire points just to get Breach on the Atlas passive, the mapped device. Pretty annoying, but definitely worth it. We're also taking the map focus notable, Singular Focus. It just really makes it so that we're getting a lot more of dunes. We're able to very, very easily sustain dunes. Now let's really focus on one of the main things that's changed between the two strategies. We are taking all of the notables from Breach instead of just all of the small minor passives from Breach. So we're getting otherworldly artifacts, which gives us increased monster density in breaches and a very small chance to get unique items from Breach monsters. That's fine, whatever to that. But we also get Within Their Grasp, gives us a chance for Chayula to just drop entire Breachstones, and a microscopic chance for those to be flawless, which makes, it's probably never going to happen, but when it eventually does, because eventually it'll happen, you just made a ton of currency off of killing that Chayula. Feels nice. Eve of Invasion's probably my favorite of all the notables, really the one that makes me feel like this is worth running instead of Wandering Path. This adds, I think, only about a 16% chance to add a breach, but when you hit on that 1% chance to get 10 extra breaches and you just have like a 15 or 16 breach map, it's absolutely insane. You're in there for a while, but I mean, you walk out of there just like bags full of money. It feels awesome. There's also Power Struggle, which makes it so that when you open the Chayula's clasped hands, you have a 4% chance to summon Chayula outright. This is pretty good. And then you also get more Chayula's clasped hands in your breaches, which is really good for just adding a lot more breach fragments into every breach. Heavy breach is probably the one that has the biggest mechanical impact, and it definitely makes it a lot easier to clear out all of the breaches and get all of the splinters, high five all the hands, all of that. This really is kind of the main secret sauce of doing non-Wandering Path breach. Heavy breach is so valuable. There are a couple of other notables here though. Gatekeepers just gives you more chance to get Chayula's and 20% chance to get twice as many splinters from Chayula's, and Tortured Dreams gives you a 50% chance for all of your Chayula's to be 2 Chayula's instead. There's also Call of Zeshtula, which isn't an amazing point, but sometimes Zeshtula will show up and just immediately get killed, and throw some Breachstones of all different flavors down, and that can be kind of useful. Getting some Ulnatal splinters can be okay. Same with the Hands of Zeshtula. You can occasionally get some Chayula or Ulnatal splinters out of that, and that's, you know, it's better than 1 point anywhere else in the tree. And then finally, Probing for Weaknesses just gives you more breaches, and Evolving Hives gives you more rares in your breaches. Now, notably, we are not taking the breach speed nodes. We don't want that, and we don't want Flash Breach, because we don't want our breaches opening and closing faster. We want them opening and closing as slowly as we can possibly get them to do. Slower is better in this case. It gives us more time to go around high-fiving all the hands and killing all the dudes. All right, that's all the breach stuff. Now let's talk about the Harbingers. Harbingers, we are basically speccing almost all the way into it. We're taking First Wave, which gives you a 25% chance for all of your Harbingers to be a boss, which is way more valuable than just a regular Harbinger. I've gotten, I think, the majority of my Fracturing Shards this league have come from Harbinger bosses. You also get Unspeakable Offensive, so you have the chance occasionally to get like a full orb instead of a fragment, which actually is pretty decent. You get a lot of Exalted Orbs, a lot of Annuls. Those are all pretty nice. They also drop a lot of maps. They just give like a good amount of currency, and they grant a ton of experience. I think that's probably the most underrated thing about Harbingers. They give a lot of XP. They also scale really well with the league mechanic. They have never been more profitable than they are right now. I have never gotten so many Fracturing Shards in a single league, and I really do pin that a lot on the Harbinger bosses. Like, as soon as I switched over to Magic Finding and Wandering Path and not being able to take First Wave anymore, I found that my Fracturing Shard frequency immediately fell off. So Harbingers are good. They are annoying though. Sometimes I will bail on them for a while. Usually after one kills me, when I'm like 90% of the way through a level, I will go, all right, that's enough Harbingers for now, and I'll leave. But I always come crawling back. We're also taking the blue altar nodes. We're getting just 20% increased chance of getting Eater of Worlds altars. This is a pretty good buff. And then Rampant Growth, also getting just like more mobs, more Ichor, little bit of value from there. Now here's a big deviation from all of the Wandering Path strategies. We're taking shrine nodes. Why take shrines? They don't really add any currency, and they don't really add that many mobs, maybe a couple of magic packs. This makes them pretty bad for Magic Find strategies, because they basically just give buffs. This makes them, I think, actually pretty decent for non-Magic Find strategies because they give buffs. They don't require a ton of points. We're spending 8 points on these shrines, these sets of shrine nodes. They make you clear through maps so much faster, which allows you to focus in, to lock in on the one league mechanic that you're doing. This is actually pretty good for currency per hour, and it feels really good too to have all the extra move speed, or the guaranteed crits, or the extra defensive value, or whatever it is you're getting from each individual shrine. I think just getting even more speed on the one league mechanic, or the couple of league mechanics that you're really locked in on, really fixating on, is better overall. We're also running Nico. This is a pretty well-known interaction by this point, but if you take Packed with Energy and you just use like Sulphite Scarabs, Rusted Sulphite Scarabs for very, very cheap, you get this massive bonus from Packed with Energy on every map. 3 max all res, 105% increased damage, which is pretty good, and also 45% increased move speed, which is really, really good. And that's only for 2 nodes. Now you do have to give up a Scarab, or remember to click Nico missions on every single map, but I think that's a pretty small price to pay. You can also take these 3 nodes here to pick up mining byproducts, and that will make it so that 10% of the time when you click on the sulfite veins, you also get some azurite. Now you can take that azurite, and I'll zip back into game here, you can take that azurite and go to the mine encampment and buy primitive resonators, which sell for like 2 to 3 chaos each, but like I have been here not that recently. I have 10,000 azurite here, so can just buy like 36 of these bad boys, and yeah, it's like that's over 100 chaos right there. And I would say, generally speaking, you probably make about 3 chaos per map just from these 3 nodes. Now, you'll note that I'm not spec'd into them right now because, thinking about it, thinking of alternatives, I decided to take the additional Harbinger shards, small passives instead, bumping this up from a 40% chance from these 2 nodes that you have to take up to a full 100% chance of getting an additional stack of currency shards. Now, most of the time, this is probably like alchemy orb shards, like, you know, pretty worthless. You probably make more consistent currency out of mining byproducts, but I kind of was feeling like I could do for some home runs. I wouldn't mind getting some more fracturing shards. I think this winds up being pretty profitable. It's very comparable to shrines. Now let's talk about other league mechanics you could run. You could spec into Expedition if you like. I think the best move would probably be, if you want to drop shrine nodes, you could do that. You could do the same with Harbinger nodes. Ultimately, that's like 8 points worth of shrine stuff. Or if you wanted to drop these nodes here, the 2 wheels for Harbinger, and then still make your way into the quant rarity wheel in the middle, but drop first wave and not really do anything with Harbinger. So that also frees you up about 8 points. And for Expedition, you don't have to come up here and take Scratching Up the Ground and a Noble Quest to get increased chance of Tujin and Danig. It's not necessary for it to work. You can just take Extreme Archaeology, Ancient Writings, and Buried Knowledge. That is sort of the bare minimum you need to have for Expedition. You could drop some more nodes if you really felt a need to come up and get like Scratching Up the Ground as well. You could find some spots to drop nodes from things like shrines. I think Expedition is pretty good. I just don't love sitting in my hideout when I could be in maps farming more currency, actually playing the game instead of talking to a guy. All right, let's talk about Scarabs. I already have them pulled out in my bag here. Breach Scarabs, those are a must-have. They give you more breaches and more splinters from hands. Gilded is all we need. They're about 5 chaos each. Pretty cheap. Harbinger Scarabs are also pretty good. They add a bunch of easy rare packs into each map, and that is the simplest option as well. Harbinger Scarabs have risen in price. They're probably somewhere in the 12 to 15 chaos range in bulk. That's usually a good indicator that it is part of a very valuable farm strategy, and they are. They are basically just a useful farm strategy on their own, so they're pretty good. You don't have to run Gilded. You could run Polished if you want to cut costs a little bit. You'll get 1 fewer Harbinger. Not really that bad of a deal. I don't think Gilded are all that expensive, especially in this league, though. Rusted Sulphite Scarabs. This is just the easiest way to guarantee Nico is on the map. You don't have to run this. You can just select him from the map device every single time, but you do have to select him from the map device every single time. I forget to do it sometimes. It's annoying that he doesn't remain selected from map to map, and so I prefer to just use Rusted Sulphite Scarabs, which are super, super cheap. Then we kind of have 3 options here. I like Gilded Divination Scarabs. That's been the thing that I've been using. They're good. You have a good div card in this map. The Fortunate is free money, and getting 150% more of them is great. You could run Reliquary Scarabs, though. They're not bad. They will make currency explosions bigger, but we're not really farming currency explosions, so they aren't a hard and fast requirement. And finally, if you decide you want to run Expedition instead of one of the other league mechanics, you probably want to use Gilded Expedition Scarabs. It makes them a lot more profitable. It makes them be guaranteed on the map instead of a relatively low chance, so definitely want to run those in there if you go the Expedition route. And Dunes is a pretty good map for Expedition, so not a bad setup at all. Now let's talk about Sextants. I have a bunch of those here in my tab. Kind of been burning through them, I suppose. Breach is self-explanatory and super cheap. Chayula is also super important. Just like in the other strategy, you could run Ulnatal instead. Neither Sextant is super expensive on their own, maybe 20 chaos each, so only about 5 chaos a map. I prefer Chayula. For one, it is a little bit more profitable. Also, I think you're probably going to have an easier time selling Chayula Breachstones than you would Ulnatal. So I think he's it's there a little better than Ulnatal, but either way. We also run Harbinger Sextants. You know, we're committing to Harbinger everywhere else, right? We're running passive points for it. We're running Scarab for it. We might as well run the Sextant. It adds an extra reward onto every Harbinger and onto the map boss. It's a pretty cheap sextant as well, and it really gives a great return on investment. And finally, we're doing something a little weird here. We're running Gloom Shrine as our final sextant. It has great synergy with shrines. It makes them all last even longer. It also helps make clearing much, much faster. This is a really easy way to force Explodey onto a build that doesn't have Explodey in it. And it's insanely cheap. You're paying like less than 2 chaos a map to get a very powerful Explodey buff that you can have up for a long section of the map. Depending on how quickly you're clearing through maps, I think in future leagues when we're not doing Wildwood, we're not spending 7 minutes in what is allegedly a quick map, and maps go back to like the 2 to 3 minute range or less. Gloom Shrine could be up for, from the time you see it until the end of the map. That's pretty nice. Now there is a flex option that I don't have here. You could drop shrines. It might be in here. Runic monsters. Here we go. Runic monsters, just 100% more of them in your maps, or 100% increased number of them in your maps. This will give you a lot more value on your expeditions if you decide to go with expedition. And then if you don't want to go that route and you don't want to go with Gloom Shrines, you got Explodey in your build and you don't need it, you can just run anything that adds more mobs into the map. So pack size, rare maps have rare packs. Anything that adds more dudes into the map is going to basically be all the same, really. All fine. In terms of our preferred map, it's still Dunes. For all the same reasons. It's the best possible layout for clearing breaches. It's just basically a super open, it's a cube full of money. That's the best way to think of Dunes. It is a cube full of money. The boss is in a consistent location. It's easy to rush and kill him. He is on the opposite side of the zone from wherever we spawn in. We spawn in the bottom left, he's in the top right. We spawn in the top left, he's in the bottom right. We always just run to the other side. After we've done the Wildwood, we run to the other side and kill the boss. Then we clear out the rest of the map. We do want to kill the boss before we kill anything else in the map so that we can ensure we only get player bonuses and minion bonuses from Eater of Worlds altars. In terms of the altars, we're just, once again, we're looking for currency duplication, quant and rarity, div card duplication, and Scarab duplication is okay. The other reason, of course, is that it drops the Fortunate. It's a great div card. It gives 2 divs for 12 cards, so pretty great. Plenty of maps where I've hauled in a Divine Orb just in terms of Fortunate cards alone. In terms of our favorite maps, we're running 11 Dunes and we are running 1 Glacier. Just like before, we heavily oversustain maps, and this really helps doing that by having an adjacent map to the one that you are focusing on. If we're running singular focus, we are actually getting more of the map that we're looking for by doing 11 and 1 instead of 12. As for rolling maps, it's pretty much the same approach as before. The only real difference here is that I like to just make sure that they're at least above 70% quantity and have no build disabling mods, but other than that, that's basically all I care about. Not looking for any sort of fancy mods or anything at all. Don't need super high quantity either. I do still like to vol maps after I've rolled them up, just in the hope that they get 8 mods, because map quantity is still good in this strategy. And then just as always, I throw away low quantity bad maps, and any unusable 8 mod maps I will save to either run on another character or to bulk sell away. In terms of our map device, we're running basically all the same setup. We're using Breach, just like you would expect, and then we're using, the same Scarabs we just talked about: Harbinger, Breach, Divination, and Rusted Sulphite, making sure it's set to Breach, making sure it's set to Eater of Worlds, making sure that we have our Sextants applied, and just making sure that nothing is wrong. It's always a good idea to take a couple of seconds before jumping into a map to make sure everything is right. Once we're in the map, we do all the same basic things. We jump into the Wildwood, we carefully clear it out, kill as many enemies as we can. They do give the most juice. Once the portal opens, we go back and clear up all the wisps that we left around the corners of the darkness. Then we zone out and do the map. While we're doing the map, we boss rush. We try not to kill anything, but it's not the end of the world if anything dies along the way to the boss. We also want to grab any Sulphite nodes that we see as soon as we see them, just to get that bonus, that damage bonus, that defensive bonus already rolling on us. Once we've killed the boss, we clear backwards from the end of the beginning, clear everything out, skip all the league mechanics though, grab all the shrine buffs as you pass by them, and activate all the blue altars. Now this is something that's a little different. We are taking player choices if they're good. We're talking currency, div card duplication, quant and rarity. Scarab duplication's okay, map duplication's okay. You can take Eldritch Minion options if the player choice sucks though. Like if it's gym duplication or Maybe it's map duplication or unique duplication and you're not feeling lucky, and the Eldritch Minion reward is something good, like div cards that give currency or other div cards. This basically just functions like stacked deck flips, but it only pulls from div cards that have that specific tag, so you can actually get some pretty valuable div cards through this altar mod. I've gotten a lot of good rewards from these altar mods. Just to give some examples, the Sephiroth, Unrequited Love, and the Nurse. Definitely worth taking over a really bad player mod instead. Once everything is cleared out, we do the league mechanics. The breaches are super simple. They're the same as the other approach, but there are a few little quirks due to not taking Wandering Path. First off, we have more rare mobs and just more mobs in general in the breaches. The breaches open and close a lot slower due to heavy breach, and we get more Chayula hands to high five as well. We also get that 4% chance to spawn Chayula when we open a Chayula hand due to power struggle, which is really good, but you want to be prepared for Chayula to just suddenly spawn on top of you and start swinging. Other than that, the philosophy is the same. You touch the glowing hand, then you clear out everything you can, high five all the hands along the way, get that money. Chayula's clasped hands are way more valuable than regular clasped hands, so anytime you see one, you want to go over and immediately grab that hand. Opening all the hands you can and killing all the breach mobs you can within the breach is still the most important thing here. And once the breach closes, then you can worry about looting the fragments and just repeat that process until you've cleared every breach in the map. Harbingers are also super simple, you just kill the guys. That's basically it, and it's kind of why I like Harbingers so much. You kill the guys, that's the mechanic. The same goes for Expedition if you go with that route. Just be sure to check your reliquary downsides before you actually hit the detonator. You don't want to make all the mobs immune to, like, say you do only lightning damage and then you accidentally hit a lightning damage immune reliquary. Now you've just made a worthless expedition full of very dangerous mobs in there. No thanks, that sucks. And that's pretty much all there is to this strategy. This strategy obviously doesn't generate as much raw currency as the Magic Find approach. Of course not, but it is a lot more universal. It's also way cheaper. We are spending about 50 chaos per map, and we can bring in anywhere from 1 to 1.5 Chayula Breachstones per map on average, potentially way more on really good maps where we get tons of extra breaches due to Eve of Invasion, or if we kill Chayula and actually get a full Breachstone from that. I did have a map where I killed 7 different Chayulas. I didn't get a Breachstone drop, but I did get about a Breachstone's worth of splinters from them, and that's still pretty good. That was a map where I managed to walk out with 2 whole Breachstones and some splinters left over despite doing this relatively inexpensive strategy. It felt pretty great. That's also just the breach side of things. Due to Eldritch Altars and Harbingers, we can pull down a decent amount of raw currency as well and a good number of fortunate cards. Since we're spending about 7 to 10 minutes per map, depending on how well the Wildwood goes and how juicy everything is and all of that, I think 7 to 7.5 maps per hour is a fairly conservative estimate. I think this puts us into the 20 divine per hour range without any amazing RNG drops. I realize this is late in the most inflated league of all time, but that's still pretty amazing for a non-juiced, non-magic find farm strategy. I think it could be a decent underestimation too, and that's always a good approach, right? Under-promise and over-deliver, I like that. I am not playing the fastest mapping build in the world by any stretch either. It's really more of a simulacrum farmer. I don't even have a built-in exploding mechanic, so if you were to make some changes and do this quite a bit more quickly, I think you could really boost the amount of profit that you're making from this well beyond what I've been able to do, and there's a lot of potential here that I haven't totally tapped into. I wasn't a huge fan of Breach immediately after it was reworked in Crucible League. I think the community in general was pretty negative about it, and unfortunately I think I bought into that negative hype, but it's really good. It's more fun than it was before, and it is very consistently profitable. I am a huge fan now, and I will definitely be using this in future leagues. Alright, I think that about covers it. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And have fun doing Breach. Bye.